to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
I've been doing this podcast since September of 2012, and boy, are my lips tired.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today. And I'm joined today by Brittany Hopkins Switlick, who is a yoga teacher and a person who totally appreciates the value of going through hard times. We're going to talk about that in a moment. But just to let everybody know, Jody Lynn is dealing with a continuing education thing for her career, so she'll be joining us again next week. But Brittany and I are going to be talking about a couple of interesting things. First of all, we're going to be talking about yoga, and I say that's interesting because I have a good friend who's going through a course right now, becoming a yoga instructor, right? Even though it's not really what she wants to do, but she's taking this course, and literally, I think it's tomorrow, she's doing her final presentation as, you know, here I am leading a class, that kind of thing. So the timing of this is spectacular. But Brittany, first of all, welcome to the program. How are you doing today?
I am great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you. And how long have you been doing this, by the way?
Been doing podcasts?
Being a yoga teacher.
Being a yoga teacher. Oh, wow. I started teaching yoga in 2004.
Oh, okay.
Oh my gosh.
Over 20 years.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been leading yoga teacher trainings for 10 years now, a little over 10 years, and taking the message on a broader off the mat, like through book. So many people think yoga is the shapes that we make on the mat in a yoga studio, but really that's just one aspect of yoga. So taking it off the mat for about a year now.
Okay. Very good. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later on too, I think, because of the experience my friend is having. But first, I want to get into how it is you started doing this in the first place, because there's always a good story behind that. And it's usually somewhat painful. But as we were talking about before we got going, it's also one of those things that virtually everybody who ever talks about that crash and burn moment, they all agree, I don't want to go through it again, but it was the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah, I think my crash and burn moment that led me to where I'm at today with having written a book was when my son was a year and a half old, and it was September of 2019. I was actually leading a yoga teacher training, and it was late on a Saturday evening, and I was having the class hold frog pose for a long time, and that's like basically your legs really far apart and your hips wide open. And I had a repressed memory from childhood show up of trauma. And thankfully it was at the end of the day, and all the lights were low, and I dismissed everybody, sent them home, and was just like, oh my gosh, what? Like, it was like my whole life needed to be reprocessed.
Wow.
And I had memory fragments try to show up the previous 10 years, but like the full memory showed up in that moment. And it was, you know, over the next probably 6 months of processing that and realizing I wasn't willing to see it for myself because I was going to have to face some things.
Yeah,
but
sure.
For my son, I needed to see it so that I could know what was happening in the world and keep him safe. And so
that was your motivation. Your son was your motivation to actually face and deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, my book is all about the ego, and that part of myself that I've lovingly named Brandy. She was like, no, we don't need to address that. But my higher self was like, oh yeah, there's other people involved now. So we need to address this. And ultimately facing that ended up leading to a divorce after 16 years of being with his bio dad. And yeah, what we talked about before of like, as hard as that was the hardest thing to do, was to kind of peel myself away from that. And then, freed myself up for so much amazing goodness in my life in the last basically 5.5 years.
And having gone through a divorce myself a couple of years ago, I know what you mean. I mean, there is nothing easy about it. I don't care whether you initiated, whether you received it, there is nothing easy about it. It's one of those defining moments that you just have to work through, and you're stronger afterward. You get stronger in a lot of different ways, but yeah, it's rough. It's rough to go through. Yeah. But when you came out of your crash and burn, or I guess I can't say when you come out because it's an ongoing process, but let's reframe that. As you've been on that path coming out of it, let's put it that way,
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest takeaways, or what are the biggest takeaways that you've gotten?
The biggest takeaways are, listening and honoring all the parts of myself. My book touches a little bit on parts work, but I'm not a psychologist. But naming that part of myself, my ego part of me, which was little Brittany, trying to keep me safe. It's basically led me to stopping and slowing down a lot more. And instead of just resisting, or reacting to life, I'm like, oh, there's something I need to know right here. There's something I need to listen to. There's something that I'm wanting. There's something that I'm needing.
Right.
What is that? And then I can move forward in healthier ways. It's just been 5.5 years of learning what it means to show up as an actual adult, with my grown-up skills and using my grown-up voice. And does that make sense?
It does. Well, it makes sense to me, again, because I've also been through a divorce, but I think it makes sense to anybody who's been through any kind of trial, because that's fairly consistent. What you're describing, that's fairly consistent with coming through any kind of a trial and then coming through the other side and deciding that, okay, life is still worth living. What am I going to get out of this? What am I going to do with it? Yeah, that plays out, I think, pretty much for everybody. I don't think there are anybody who get accepted from that.
And it's been super clarifying. What is it that I want? Coming out of the divorce, that's when I started as a yogi, I'd done meditation. It was kind of an on and again, off again relationship with meditation.
Oh yeah, sure.
But during that time, as I committed, my best friend Molly introduced me to the Sattva Yoga Institute's meditation technique. And it was 30 minutes a day, no questions about it. Sit for 30 minutes and just repeat the mantra over and over again. And it was in those 30 minutes every day that it was it was like moving through the trees in the forest and then coming out a clearing on the other side. It was on the other side, it was oh, what is it that I want? And it's really, so I was telling my husband last night, it was in that meditation practice that I feel like I manifested him. It was oh, if I get to decide what I want in life instead of what does this other person want in life, because I'd always geared my attention towards what does he want. It's what do I want? And I got so clear on, okay, if I'm going to be with someone, I want to be with someone that I can do yoga with, that I can meditate with, that I can go on hikes with, that I can eat really expensive food with, and not talk about how much it costs, and that I can go listen to music with. And I made the wildest dream list of what is it that I want. It just was crazy what has happened, how fast life has happened, but in the most beautifully unfolding sort of a way.
That's fabulous. Really, really good.
Yeah.
Now, you also alluded to the fact that you're an author. You're the author of the book Dancing with Ourselves. And tell us a little bit about where that title came from.
Basically, before becoming a yogi, I was a dancer. And I danced professionally. The bulk of my career was in Chicago.
Okay.
And after learning about my ego and realizing that there's this part of myself that I had been resisting or unconsciously letting drive the car, essentially, instead of resisting, I was like, oh, I need to embrace this. And the saying, it takes two to tango.
Oh yeah.
And if you ever watch ballroom dancing, there's the partner that's the strong, steady, holding kind of the space and the consistent rhythm. And then there's the partner that's full of flair, sequins and fringe and hair waving and all of that. And I like to think of my higher self being the steady, the calm, still dancing, still moving, still contributing. And then I have this other part of myself that can bring the fun and bring the flair, just as long as I don't let it take over.
Yes.
So dancing with ourselves. And I intentionally put a space between the our and the selves to be no, it's not just myself, it's myselves. And the subtitle is A Practical Guide to Harness the Ego and Live on Purpose, rather than so many people are we got to fire the inner critic. How to get rid of it. And it's no, it's not going anywhere. And we don't want it to.
Exactly.
We wouldn't be having this conversation right now if we didn't have an ego.
Yeah. because the ego is basically who we are. That's us. That's our identity.
Yeah.
So I have the same issue with people who say, I got to find a way to get my ego out of here. Well, your ego is who you are. Why would you want to get who you are out of here? That doesn't make any sense to me. But it does make sense to actually decide, okay, I am in charge of it. Because that's what you're saying with the title of your book. I'm in charge of my ego. I'm going to do with it what I decide to do. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And not letting her, because my ego is, you know, some days she acts like my 4-year-old self and will throw a fit, will throw a tantrum. And other days she's like a sulky teenager. And so that's where it's like, okay, bringing her up to speed into present day. Like it makes sense that you feel frustrated. It makes sense that you feel sad, or whatever it is, offer compassion to that part of ourselves. So then, yeah, we're not wrestling, just like bringing it.
One of the things that jumped out at me when I was reading your bio was your use of the term inner critic, which I totally identify with. And I think most people do if they're really, really honest with themselves. Yeah, we all pretty much recognize that inner critic. One of the things that's striking about the inner critic, first of all, is that we all have one. Second of all, everybody else has one too, which that's a little bit of a surprise for some of us when we find out we're not the only ones doing this, that everybody else is doing the same thing that we're doing. And then the way I always like to describe it is it's amazing how rough those inner critics are, because we treat ourselves in a way we would never treat our friends. I mean, do you know why that is? I've never figured out why we do that. I mean, I kind of have some idea, but we go to extremes.
Yeah. No, yeah, the things that we say to ourselves can be terrible. And that's where it's been helpful to kind of disassociate, not disassociate like from my body, but like separate myself and be like, this part of myself is saying these things. In yoga, we say we have thoughts, but we are not our thoughts.
Okay.
So we're in this human experience and thoughts are happening in our brain, but it's not actually who we are. We are actually the witnessing the thoughts if we can step back enough. And that's where meditation comes in, and that's where the asana practice that we do on the mats comes in, is to create a little space from the thoughts / the inner critic or inner child, whatever it is you want, or the ego, whatever you want to call it. It's just a part of the human experience, is to have this chatterbox in our brain. And yeah, learning to see, so, you know, some of the criticalness comes from childhood, like somebody speaking that towards us, or some of it is to help motivate. Like, it's like, you know, the tough love, like some coaches are like, we got to speak tough to the, well, I want to give an example. In college, I remember one of my friends played on the basketball team, and I'd go to a lot of the games. And the coach, to one of the players, he would just be so like gentle and like, you've got it. It'll be okay. Brush it off. And then to my friend, he'd like get on him really hard. Like, get it together. Why aren't you do better? Like, pay attention. And I would get defensive of my friend and be like, why is the coach so mean to you and so gentle with the other guy? And he's like, oh, you know, if he spoke to me the way he spoke to him, I would just like sit on the bench and like, I wouldn't actually try. But I'm the kind of person that needs a little tough love. And the coach is wise enough to know that he needs to speak to the different players in different ways. And I think maybe that's where the inner critic might be a part of that, of like, it develops in childhood to help us. Our egos develop, like I'm witnessing it with my 7-year-old. It's like developing right now, and the things he's saying to himself, he thinks that that's the way that it's going to help him. But really, it's like we're kids and we don't really know. So,
and it's also an interesting thing, because I believe that the inner critic is actually judgment neutral. We're the ones who assign the judgment to it.
The good or the bad.
Say, yeah, it's bad judgment or good judgment, bad critic or good critic. I'll give you an example of the good critic, because you were kind of referring to that in the story with the basketball player who was your friend. I live in Connecticut, and I am a UConn Huskies fan because we have a men's and women's basketball teams that have really been very, very successful. And for a lot of years, it's like, okay, I'm going to support this. This is great. Yeah. And you may recognize the name Gino Auriemma. He's the coach of the women's team. He is notorious for being hardest on his best players, to the point where there are some who have basically they've been recruited, they've gotten the scholarship, they came on the team, and they just couldn't take it, and they ended up transferring elsewhere. But there are others who defend it like crazy, and they're the ones who had the massively successful careers. And every one of them says the same thing: that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Gino, coach treating me the way that he treated me, and every one of them says that he wasn't abusive, which is really interesting, because he can be really, really tough on people. But every one of them says he's not abusive. That what he was actually doing was pushing them to be the player they really could be. So it kind of points to you can either have it. It's a negative, that is, you're tearing yourself down or someone else is tearing you down, or you can make it a positive that becomes a motivator. That's a really fascinating thing, I think.
Yeah, that's making me think of the persecutor versus the challenger. So I talk about in one of the chapters of my book, the drama triangle and the empowerment dynamic. And the drama triangle is basically anytime I'm feeling powerless or not at peace, my ego is likely playing the role of victim, persecutor, or rescuer. And the persecutor sounds like you should, or I should, or always call it a should show. And whereas on the flip side is the empowerment dynamic, where victim becomes creator. My higher self is a creator, where rescuer becomes a coach, where persecutor becomes a challenger. And the challenger provides loving pressure. And I might show up to a situation with the intention of being a challenger and providing loving pressure. But whoever's on the other side, they're the ones that get to decide whether I'm being a persecutor or a challenger.
True.
Like, depends on their mindset. If their ego's in charge or if their higher self's in charge. So that coach, he likely was showing up with the energy of challenger, providing loving pressure. And it was the player's mindset that decided whether he was being abusive or not.
Oh, yeah. In fact, there was a story that came out of this past season. This past season, they won the national championships, so they got a lot of attention, and a lot of stories came out of it. And there was one player on the team, the leading player on the team was Paige Beckers, who ended up, was at the end of her college career, so she became a WNBA player. And then one of her co-players went to Coach Auriemma one time and complained to him, saying, "Why aren't you as tough on me as you are on Paige? I mean, she's getting all of your attention. Why don't I get the attention?" So basically, she was calling him out for being too soft on her, which was really an interesting thing. So again, pointing to what you're saying, that it's how you're perceiving it. Who's perceiving it, that's the way it's actually experienced.
Yeah, because it's in the loving pressure that growth is. With a coach, consistent like support, but with the challenger. So back to the thinking through your question around the inner critic, like we assign it good or bad, but we can choose whether to receive it as a challenger or as a persecutor.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. It's very empowering that way, because now, well, that does two things. It does one thing in a very interesting way. The thing that it does in a very interesting way is that it takes the judgment out of it by changing the judgment. You know what I mean? Because we tend to be very judgmental, and yet by turning it around like that and turning it into a challenge, to use your word, all of a sudden the judgmentalism seems to go away. I mean, it's the reverse judgment, but now all of a sudden it doesn't seem important anymore. Which is kind of a weird thing. I'm not quite sure why that plays out, but it does. That's the way the human psyche tends to respond to something like that.
And that brings back to yoga again. Yoga says nothing is either good or bad. It just is.
Right.
And it's our ego that's assigning it as good. Our higher self is like, life is happening. It's raining. And there's a person that lived to be 103 that's quoted as, "What's the secret to living that long?" And he says, "When it rains, I let it." It's like not resisting.
Yeah. Non-resistance is huge.
The rain could be good. It could be bad. I mean, we might need the water, or it might, right? we've our human attachment to things being our way, our ego's attachment, is what makes it feel good or feel bad. When we can just experience it is the idea.
One of the most fascinating things to me is the tendency we humans have to describe things in terms of perfection. And the more that I've thought about that and discussed it with people here on the show and with other people in my life, the more I've come to realize I have no clue what perfection is. I mean, every time I try to define it, it just kind of disappears into this cloud of nothingness. And I think that happens largely because it's a moving target. You know, it's kind of like having a goal line, and then you try to cross the goal line, and the goal line moves 10 feet away from you, and then you try to cross again, and it goes 10 feet. I mean, you never reach it. So like, well, how do you know what it is if you can't actually get there?
Yeah. So just being with the experience. Well, not just being, like we're moving through an experience, but more allowing, I guess, would be the word that I'm looking for. Allowing the experience. Yeah.
And taking the judgmentalism out of it. That's really what's at the root of all of this, is the judgment. Yeah. One of the things I try to do is I actually take, for the most part in my own thought process, I try to take good and bad, right and wrong out entirely and limit myself to just thinking about it in terms of like or dislike. I'm allowed to like or dislike something. You know, that's always allowed. Yeah. Just don't treat it in terms of good or bad, right or wrong, because that's where I end up. That's where I end up being that inner critic that beats the crap out of myself.
Yeah. That's making me think of a friend that I worked with over a decade ago. He had a dog, and he would say the dog's thinking yuck and yum. Thinking what you said about thinking of like or dislike.
Right. Yeah.
It's either yuck or yum.
Yeah.
The ice cream tastes, that flavor is yuck or that flavor is yum.
Pretty much.
Doesn't feel like a right or a wrong, good or bad.
That's right. And at that point, it's just what is your preference? In fact, I also try to apply the same concept, the same principle to my relations with other people, which has done tremendous things for me, because now I no longer try to figure out whether or not that's a good person or a bad person, whether that person is acting rightly or wrongly. I just decide whether or not I like them or I don't like them. And that now there's all the argumentation is gone at that point. Yeah. There's nothing to fight over. There's nothing to struggle over. It's like, okay, I don't like him. Oh, I like him. I don't like him. It's simple. There's nothing else to it. I don't have to change anything. I don't have to change him or her. I don't have to change me. It's just like, I like it. I don't like it. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah. When we go back to when we're babies, like I have a 2.5-year-old, so still relatively close to that time when she was just a little lump. And
right.
She wasn't like, she's trying to learn to do things, right? And she wasn't like, I suck because I can't do this. It just was like, I don't like that I can't do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't in words, it was in cries or grunts, right?
I have a former co-host named Cindy Chavez who was on the show for about a 4 or 5 year period. And she once made a really interesting observation. She was talking about this in the context of, let's see, what was the exact context? I lost it. Well, I'll come back to that one in a moment. There was a nice little story in there and ties in perfectly, and I just can't remember what it was.
Okay.
But what I will do, I'll tie into something else that she said that may actually cue whatever the first thing was. She talked about how the resistance piece that you were referring to showed up in her life. And one of the ways that it showed up was that she had resistance to allowing herself to be treated. So she'd go out to lunch with a friend, right? And have a great time catching up and so forth. And at the end of the lunch, her friend would reach for the bill and she'd say, oh, no, I've got it. Because she couldn't let her friend buy her lunch for her. She couldn't allow herself to receive that lunch. That's an example of that resistance cropping up. That resistance that you were referring to that we really want to let go of through the meditative process or whatever process that we end up choosing. And that is truly, like you were saying earlier, That's the secret to a long and happy and healthy life. The less resistant we are to all the things, including the things that are coming our way that we deserve to have.
Yeah.
You know, that lack of resistance on those it's crucial.
I feel that, like the receiving. I talk in my yoga teacher trainings. It's a big part of it is getting to the lies we tell ourselves, or the limiting beliefs is what kind of is more popular phrase for it.
Right.
And one of the lies that Brandy tells me is that I don't matter or I'm not worth it. And yeah, in the like receiving, letting somebody buy me lunch, I could feel that, like that I'm not worth it.
Yeah.
Is a limiting belief that part of myself, my ego, is trying to tell me, but it's not necessarily in words, right? It's just in a feeling.
Right. Oh yeah.
It's in an uncomfortable feeling in the body, in the nervous system. And so I love that your former co-host was able to see that. And I wonder how she moved through that.
Well, that for her was a key discovery, because she didn't realize that she'd been doing that. And when she finally consciously brought that to mind, that's when she started working on, you know what? I have been too much of a people pleaser. Why not start pleasing myself? Why not start accepting gifts that come my way because I deserve them?
Yeah.
And so she did a lot of work on that one. And I mean, today she's a marvelous person anyway. But she's also a much more powerful person because of that. And by the way, that did work. Telling that story did work. I remembered what the thing was that she was telling me. It also pointed out to me another occasion was that particularly in religions, the word sin gets used a lot. And it gets used in a very judgmental way. And she is something of a religious scholar. I mean, she doesn't have the degrees to go with it, but she has done in-depth investigation of all the major religions of the world. And that included finding the original meaning of the word sin, where it originally comes from. And it turns out that all the word means is to miss the mark. Yeah. That's all. There's no judgment. There's no attachment. You just missed. You know, so if you have a bow and arrow and you aim and you miss the target, what do? Well, you pick up another arrow and you shoot again. That's the extent of the whole thing right there.
Yeah.
Now, how many of us turn sin into this horrible thing that we have to, oh my God, you mustn't sin. You were sinning again. No, you just missed.
Yeah. You missed the mark.
Yeah.
I love that I was thinking, I was like, I wonder if he's going to say I missed the mark, because that's what I was taught growing up.
Oh, you were? Okay. So you were among the few who actually got the right teaching.
Yeah. But I still was given an element of judgment along with it. Sure. But I did know that definition. Yeah. But yeah, kept bringing it back to that context of, it's like a softening. Like I think of it like grasping versus palms open. My good friend Carrie taught me this visual probably 11 years ago now, but like when we're grasping something, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, when we're grasping it, if it's a good thing I'm grasping, I'm likely smothering it. Or if it's a bad thing I'm grasping, I'm just going to hold myself in misery longer. Whereas when I open my palms, it can flow in, flow out, flow in, flow out. Right, there's more back to that allowing.
Yeah. And that's when the good things happen, because that flowing in, flowing out, that's the energy of life. And that's where all the good things come from. It's from that.
Yeah, from going with the flow.
Yeah.
The downstream.
Yeah. I haven't heard that one in a while, but the downstream metaphor, that's always been a fun one. You can be paddling upstream, or you can just let go and let the current take you downstream, because that's where all the good things are anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that just reminded me of my mindset coach, Ellen McCarty. I call her and I'm in it, like I'm clearly resisting life. I'm like, I need help not resisting. She's like, well, just put your paddles in the boat.
Yeah, right.
Just pull your paddles in, let the boat right.
Yeah. In fact, that's actually been a significant portion of my personal life over the last 2 or 3 years, at least, probably a little bit longer than that. In that I've been consciously shifting my day-to-day routine around so that all I'm doing now is following that principle. I pulled the oars in. Where am I finding myself going next? And just go with that, which is a huge departure for me, because I was a consummate planner. I could plan anything to death. I could plan it to the 169,000th degree, not taking any steps, mind you, just planning. I was really, really good at that. And all it did was hold me back.
Yeah.
I finally, after a lot of work, finally let go of that. And now I just go with whatever the flow is. And the flow is taking me to some kind of surprising places.
Like where?
Just to give you an idea, right now, for the last, let's see, how long has this been going on? It's hard to identify where the exact starting point is. I've been interested in AI for about the last year and a half. And about roughly a half year ago, I started messing around with, well, actually a little bit longer than that. I started messing around with, can I use AI to do programming? Because I used to do development work, websites and so forth. But not really high level. I was relatively low level. And ended up leaving that behind because I really didn't enjoy it a whole lot. And I figured, well, I'm never going to go back to that again. I'm certainly not going to do anything high level because that's way more than I want to learn, way more than I want to do. Yeah, I can kind of understand it, but I don't want to have to learn that at all. I don't want to have to do it. It's boring. It's just tedious. I can't tolerate it anymore. So what I've been doing for the last 6 months, I've been using AI to program on a high level program to the point where I'm actually creating my own AI, something I thought I would never, ever do. And I got there by kind of just taking the paddles out of the water and seeing where it goes, and end up just trying this, trying that, experimenting with this, experimenting with that. And all of a sudden I have a passion for this thing that I thought I would never have a passion for, just because I pulled the paddles out of the river. Who knew?
Yeah.
I certainly didn't.
I love that. So in the Yoga Sutras, one of my favorite sutras is 2.46, is create balanced action between sthita sukha. Sthita is the effort,
okay,
and sukha is the ease.
Okay.
And my teacher, Baron Baptiste, made it even more simple. He says, try easy. So there is the try is the, I am doing something, but be easy about it. And some of us, like my egos had me more prone to the do, like I could probably plan more, but I just go. I jump into life and I just go. And I need more ease. Like I need to level it with more ease. Whereas some people are like, I'm just going to be easy about it, but there's no try. So, right, depending on who you are and how your ego is.
Sure, yeah.
But lately, yeah, I've just hustled. I've hustled for the last, basically my whole life. But since starting my yoga studio in 2014 is when it was. Yeah, I hustled to the point of hurting my health. And now that I have 2 children, I have a 7-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and I lead yoga teacher trainings, and I have a lot on my plate, and I've written a book somehow. It's like, what if I just tried easy? Like, what if I just do have conversations with Walt Thiessen and just see what happens, instead of I got to get this book in front of it. How do I succeed at this?
Right.
What if I just treated life like a game?
Yeah. Interesting you should mention a book too. I have a good friend who has also been a guest on the podcast a couple times, and he wrote a book called The Last Law of Attraction, book you'll ever need to read. And of course, there had been hundreds and hundreds of law of attraction books written by the time he had published his. So my first question is, okay, what makes you think that people are going to read yours after they've read all the others? I mean, it's not that expansive a topic. I mean, you can pretty much cover it. He says, I didn't even think about it that way. I said, okay, so how are you going to promote it? And he says, well, I can tell you how I've been promoting it. I said, oh, okay, how are you doing that? He says, every day I answer an email, or I respond to a blog post, or I take a phone call, or I do something in service of the book. And that's it. That's my entire thing. He used that method to sell 150,000 copies of his book.
Yeah.
And it's still selling.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. 10 minutes a day. Is it Mike Dooley? Mike Dooley, the Notes from the Universe.
Right.
I would put my 3 goals in and get an email every day. It's like, what are you doing? 10 minutes in that direction. And I love that. That's how I ended up building a straw bale house. That's how I ended up getting a job in China. That's how I ended up starting a yoga studio, like just 10 minutes. But yeah, trying easy, backing it off to like just at least one thing in that direction.
And I love your phrasing there. That well, I guess your teacher gave it to you. The try and the easy in the same sentence, because the try is the action piece, and the easy is I'm just going to do it really easy. I'm not going to do it hard. I'm just going to just take little steps, just see where it goes. Because that's the combination that's powerful. That's the one that produces incredible results. So incredible that when you're first proposing it to yourself, you think, that can't work.
There's that ego again.
Right? Didn't you have that moment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thankfully, I've had enough examples now in my life that I can believe it. Like I've had enough examples of showing up and doing the work and having things. I mean, I've had plenty of things not work. Like it's helpful for me to remember that there have been things that, like I went through a period where I did a chair yoga certification. So I was like, I really want everybody to do yoga. I want it. So I was like, if you can't get out of a chair, you can still do yoga. And so I did the certification, and then I bought 25, chairs, like banquet chairs, because I wanted them to be sturdy and supportive and a little bit comfortable, like with cushion. Anyways, and I was like ready for everybody to come do chair yoga. And then I learned that, silver sneakers is at the Y. It's at the right. Nobody's going to come to a yoga studio. Not nobody, but it's like, that was an example. But I didn't like stay like in the failure of it. I just was like, okay, that didn't work. Moving on. What's the next thing?
Funny thing too about that kind of gets classified as a failure. But there's a funny thing about failures like that. At the time that you have them, it seems like they just kind of failed and there's nothing you can do about it. The amazing thing over time is that they end up feeding into other things that you do in ways that you never planned on and you never expected and never could have pre-calculated. Never could have said, it's going to lead to that. And yet they do. They all do.
Yeah.
It's astonishing.
I love that. Thank you for saying that, because I did that training, I think it was 11 years ago. And fast forward to this most recent teacher training group that I graduated a group of 13 teachers. I think it was 2 weeks ago. And one of the trainees broke her 3 bones in her ankle halfway through the training.
Wow.
And I didn't skip a beat. I was like, you can continue the training. Like you can be in a chair and still do this program. You could be laying down and still do this program. So thank you for pointing out that it was a long game.
Yeah. Had you made, until we talked about just now, had you made that connection?
No.
Yeah.
Thank you.
See, I think that's the real truth about perfectionism. What perfection really, the whole perfection concept really is, it's a way of convincing ourselves that we didn't get there. When in fact we get there every time. Just not the way we expected. That's all. Yeah.
I like to think about it as, back to your planning, like you're on one side of a river and you need to get to the other side, and you're like, okay, I'm going to step on that rock and then that rock and that rock, and this is how I'm going to get across. But you might get 2 or 3 rocks out and you're like, oh wait, that one's farther away than I thought. I have to redirect, or I have to go back and maybe go a different route.
Or maybe you slip and fall in the river, then you have to swim across the river.
Yeah, right. So setting an intention of the thing, but letting go of how.
Yeah. Letting that, you referenced Mike Dooley. He is notorious for talking about the horrible hows, right?
The cursed hows.
The cursed hows. Yeah. Want to do without those hows. They are not serving you at all.
No. But that's, that part of ourselves, and that part of you sounds like they ran the show all the time. Like, we got a plan.
Oh yeah.
Plan right.
Planner. That was it. I had to know all the hows. I had to figure out every single how in the universe before I could take a single step.
Yeah. My mom says that when people would ask me what I was going to major in when I was going to college, my response was, I don't know, I'm just going.
No, nice response.
So I guess I've kind of always had that part that I don't know if this is going to work out, but I'm going to go do it anyways. So I'm grateful that my ego never stopped me. She just made it a little bit miserable along the way.
Yeah, they're good at that. But that's kind of what your book is about.
Yeah, is basically like, instead of allowing that part of myself to make it miserable along the way, it's like stopping and checking in. What is it? What do I need right now? Oh, I need to take a nap, or I need a snack, or I need to give myself a hug. Usually it's I need a snack or I need to meditate.
Okay.
The two things. Because when I'm hungry, tired, overwhelmed, Brandy is more likely to be taking the lead.
Yeah.
But if I've taken care of my basic needs and I've meditated, my higher self is more likely to.
You're reminding me of the HALT acronym. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was it hungry?
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired.
Lonely and tired.
Yeah, if you encounter any of those four things, halt. Just stop right there.
Yes. Because probably, yeah, I've heard about that in terms of like relationship conversations. And that's where the ego has been helpful in our relationship, in my marriage with Adam. I'm Brittany, my ego's Brandy. He can tell.
You can tell which is which.
And he's Adam, his ego's Alex, and I can tell. And so it's like, oh, how do we have this conversation between Brittany and Adam rather than, because it's not going to be productive if Brandy and Alex are trying to navigate.
Part of it is also finding a way to, I'm not sure what the correct way is to say this. You can probably track this more accurately just because you wrote the book, and so you've given a lot of attention to this. But in some way, there has to be an arrangement between the two, right?
Like an agreement between me
and
an
agreement, yeah.
Can you give me an example of what, like?
I'm not sure if I can give you an example. What I'm thinking is, in order to be at peace with yourself, you have to be at peace with yourself.
Yes. Yeah. I have an exercise in the book where you write a letter to your ego.
Okay.
And the formula I got from Terry Real. He's the creator of relational life therapy.
Okay.
It's a couples therapy method, but he has you write in a letter to your adaptive child. But it's like, dear Brandy, thank you for is the first thing.
Okay.
Thank you for trying to keep me safe. Thank you for trying to motivate me. Thank you for what you've cost me. What you've cost me is my health in a lot of ways, because I've been so anxious trying to accomplish.
Sure.
What you've cost me is connection, authentic connection, because you were so busy trying to keep everybody happy.
Yeah.
What you've cost me. Yeah. I'm spacing on it. Thank you. What you've cost me, what you've given me. What you've given me is a whole lot of credentials.
Yeah, right.
You've given me a whole lot of experiences that I'm so glad that I've had. You've given me the ability to do lots of things, right? So thank you, what you've given me, what you've cost me, and then the plan moving forward. The plan moving forward is, anytime you're feeling defensive or like you don't matter or overwhelmed, I need you to tug on my shirt sleeve and say, excuse me, I need a moment. And I basically have to have a conversation with myself like I'm a 4-year-old, like I would when my son was 4. It's like, it makes sense that you're sad right now. I see that you're hungry. Let's take a deep breath. Let's take a deep breath. Let's take a break. Let's have a snack. And then let's move forward, because I've got us. I'm capable. I'm intelligent. I'm strong. I've got us. So let's go. So that is a really powerful tool. Yeah. I think I bring it in chapter 1. It's in the very first chapter, because it's like, until you can have compassion and understanding of that part of yourself, it's just going to be a battle.
It makes sense because it's fundamental. But for the exact reason you just gave. If you don't find a way to make peace there, you might as well just skip step 2, because you're not going to get anywhere until you get that one ironed out.
And it's like, I see that you're sad. It makes sense that you're sad. And it could be, it makes sense for whatever happened today, or it could be, it makes sense for whatever happened 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's still in our nervous system today.
Mm-hmm.
And so saying it makes sense that you feel this way.
It's interesting to me that you turned into a multiple personality in a sense. You have the two essences, the ego, or I'm not sure how you think of it, but something along that line.
Yeah.
I don't really think about it that way within myself, but I can see the value of that because it creates clarity just by having that distinction.
Well, it makes me, it's like if I can just blame it on Brandy, I can admit to the behavior.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm ashamed of some of the things that I say or do, like, and in order for me to make like a change, I have to admit that I do it. And so that separation, like, it's not actually a whole different personality. It's just I'm creating a separation for this part of myself does this thing. It makes it feel safe for me to admit it. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great tool.
Like my husband is never like, Alex wants you to know this. Because he's a little bit more confident, whereas I'm just like, Brandy would like you to know. And it feels weird at first, but it turns out I didn't make it up. My friend Molly, who was like, what if you name that part of myself? She didn't make it up. Or it's like we made it up, but it's the thing that exists. IFS, internal family systems, is a super popular therapeutic technique now. It's like your inner firefighter, your inner critic, your inner teenager, it's like if you can see all the different ages of yourself. Reminds me of Maya Angelou. She has a poem that's like, I'm 4 years old, I'm 16 years old, I'm 24 years old, and I'm 60 years old. It's like, I am all of these ages. So
that sounds like a Maya Angelou thing.
Yeah, it's like she knew about parts work before even it was a thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, creating that separation allows me to admit to some things that are not so awesome, so that then I can actually make a change.
Yeah.
Instead of deny.
I know in my own case, and this is something particularly common among males. I was trained from a very young age to repress all my emotions. And so when I had to come to grips with that and figure out how to pull them back out again, by that point I was past 50. So I had quite a collection of things to overcome. Let's put it that way. And I didn't do it through the approach that you're talking about. I did it more just in terms of being aware, cognizant of every single thing that came up, any feeling that I experienced, and just, okay, there's a feeling. What is this one? I don't even know what to call it. That's all right. Sit with it for a moment. It'll tell you.
Yeah.
And learning that way. So that was how I basically along the way learned how to cope with all those different feelings that came up. Just because they were coming up for the first time, I hadn't experienced them directly in my conscious mind before that. I don't have those feelings. They don't exist.
I acknowledge how brave you had to be to sort through 50 years of feelings and allowing them.
Thank you. I mean, I'm not sure that I thought of it as bravery. I thought of it as necessary. It was the only route out.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that. Yeah.
Well, some people there is that way out, but they don't take it.
They don't take it. That's true. Yeah. And I was willing to take it. And well, part of the reason I was able to and willing to take it was from doing this podcast. The podcast, I started the podcast because I've been an entrepreneur since shortly after the turn of the millennium. And then 2008 came along and it wiped my business out. My business was one of the collateral damage businesses. At the time, I was providing web services to very small local nonprofit organizations around the country. And of course, in a financial crisis, they all get wiped out because nobody gives money to small local nonprofit organizations in a financial crisis. They just go poof and they're all gone. So it wiped out my income. And my ex ran a gardening service. And of course, that's an extra. You don't spend money on something like a gardening service in the middle of a financial crisis. So most of our businesses just blew up, disappeared in about a month, and our income disappeared, and it was just terrifying. And then I spent the next 4 years trying to start again from scratch and rebuild it, and it wasn't getting anywhere. I was not making ground. I was losing ground. We were going deeper in debt, and she wasn't able to get much going either. So, I mean, we were in really, really bad straits. By 2012, I was desperate, and I had no idea what was going wrong because I wasn't doing anything different. I thought I actually was, but I didn't realize it. And I didn't know what to do about it. I couldn't afford to hire anybody to help me. I didn't have any money. The money was all gone. The savings was all gone. What do? Well, I have a tech background, and at that time, podcasting was just kind of starting, but you didn't have, the YouTubes and the Zooms and all that kind of stuff. So you didn't have the tools. But I had enough IT background that I figured, well, I can kind of invent that. I can figure out a way to record conversations. I actually figured out a way to tap my own phone. This is before cell phones became much of a thing, right? So I figured out how to tap my phone so that I could record the conversation. And then that became the basis for doing the podcast. Well, a few years later, all these other great things come along, so I don't have to do that anymore. But an amazing thing happened. I started the podcast because I wanted to get help. I figured, well, I'd heard about this law of attraction thing, so I'll bring in experts and they can teach me, and they can teach me where I'm going wrong and how this LOA thing works and why it's not a bunch of woo-woo nonsense and all this other stuff. And that worked out beautifully. The part I didn't expect was that I was going to love doing the show so much. And that kept me going. So, I mean, I've done over 2,000 episodes. It doesn't take 2,000 episodes to cover the law of attraction. You can cover that in the first 100 or two. It doesn't take that long. But I had to keep going because I was enjoying it so much. Yeah. And that's my long-winded way of saying that's how I ended up figuring out that I wanted to bring my emotions to the front, because this was such an easy venue to do it in. Having these interviews, conversations with co-hosts on a regular basis, people like you coming on as guests, talking to the audience and sharing these conversations. It was just, it was such an easy way to feel things. And so that was my revenue. That was my emotional revenue. That's where it all kind of started to crop up, and things started to come out in the conversation. And then I started exploring, like the whole planning thing. Where was that coming from? What was that all about? And anyone who's been listening for most of that 12.5-year period knows the story. But yeah,
you've been in evolution. Thank you for sharing that. What a cool, like trusting the process. That's
exactly.
What it sounds like.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and learning that I can trust the process. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn, because I didn't believe that at first. That's why I was a planner. Because I had to, nobody else was going to take care of it. I had to take care of it.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Yeah.
So learning to trust that was a big challenge. Well worth it. But it was a big challenge. Yeah.
That's so good. Oh. Yeah, it's been interesting. I'm just thinking about, because here we are in this last few months, and my husband sells residential windows. So it's like, oh yeah, like if they have windows that are keeping the dirt out, it's fine. Like, oh, just being willing to trust the process, whether it's like, where do we stay the course? Where do we pivot? And it's interesting, like through it all, it's just been clear that I'm following this path with yoga, whether it's through yoga, leading yoga teacher trainings, or with the book, having conversations about the book. And I've taken the content from the book, which is content from the yoga teacher trainings, and I've turned it into a keynote speech. And it's like, curious where that's going to go.
Right.
How to can't read the book in an hour, but can definitely share the key nuggets. And it's like, that just feels like, there's the practical day-to-day life of things, but it's like, I've just always been clear, this is the path I'm on with, and feeling the support of my husband behind that is really great too.
Yeah, sure. When you have that supportive partner where you're providing that mutual support, that's the ideal. That's the best possible relationship. Yeah. Really good.
Feel lucky.
So the book is called Dancing with Ourselves. I presume it's available everywhere.
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble, wherever. You can get it in Kindle or the ebook version, hardback, paperback. I'm currently recording the audio version. So
good for you. Good for you.
By the end of the summer, hopefully.
Yeah.
So that's been fun.
You're doing it in your own voice?
Yeah.
Good. Yes.
And that's been interesting. Like stories that I tell with my face and my hands, I had to learn how to write it in a book.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I am trying to make the words from the book sound like I'm telling you. It's this weird, like reverse reinvention process, but
it's not all that different from doing a podcast.
Mm.
Because I mean, now doing a podcast is easy for me, but those first few episodes they weren't painful, but I was not relaxed. I can tell you that. There was nothing relaxed about it. I was kind of pushing it, trying to fake it till you make it, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they're choppy. I mean, if I go back and listen to them, which I never listen to my own episodes anyway, but if I did go back, I know what they're going to sound like. They're going to sound choppy. They're going to sound disjointed. Like they aren't like strained, stressed, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's something that you only learn just by repetition. Mm-hmm. The more that you do it over and over again. With my same friend Cindy, she was great at these analogies. She'd say, you can learn anything. You want to learn how to draw? You can learn how to draw. Anyone can learn how to draw. You get a book with 365 blank pages in it, and you draw something every day. It doesn't matter how bad it is. Doesn't matter that you're not going to show it to anybody. You draw something every single day. I guarantee in a year, you're going to learn how to draw. And it's true.
Yeah.
That's how you learn anything. You just keep trying it over and over and over again, and you eventually get there.
Yeah. I had t-shirts made. I said it enough times that I'm like, this needs to go on a t-shirt. It's not magic. It's just practice.
Yes. I love that.
Not magic. It's just practice. And that's the shirt that I wear. I have 3 different versions that I wear my yoga teacher trainings are Friday, Saturday, Sunday, once a month. And I wear one every day because the teachers trainees are like, this is impossible. And I just point at my shirt. I'm like, trust the process and do the work.
That's good. That's really good. I love it.
Yeah.
We like to do a few things at the end of every episode. One thing is we like to remind you that it's probably a good idea for you to tell people how to reach you and how to find your book and so forth, because otherwise they won't know where to find your book or anything. So tell people how to find you.
Yeah. My website is brittanyhopkins.com. That's BRITTANY, Hopkins.com. And everything is there, from the book to where to buy the book. If you want to hire me to speak, you can hire me to speak. I have a video library of over 400 recordings, whether it's meditation or yoga asana or workshops that you can do on demand. On Instagram, I'm brittany.hopkins.switlick. And I'm on Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, Practice with Brittany.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Second thing I like to do, I can't really do it quite as well when it's just 2 of us. When I have a co-host, I turn to the co-host and I ask them to kind of give their take on what's the big way to tie everything together that we talked about today. Because as the host, I'm asking most of the questions, so I'm playing a central role, and I can't really have that third-party viewpoint. So I'm unfortunately unable to do that one. I'll just tell you what it has meant to me so far today. Having the conversation with somebody who's been through the same kind of crash and burn and come out the other side. I always enjoy that anyway. But I especially like the fact that you came through that crash and burn and it didn't even play a major role other than you had to get through it, and you did. And the way you described it, it almost sounded effortless. Like that was just something I had to go through. That was it. I'm sure it wasn't effortless because it never is, but you just make it sound so easy.
I mean, I meditated a lot, which is interesting because that was hard to make myself sit and be with myself for 30 minutes a day. But and that was all during 2020.
Which is a good time to do it, by the way.
Yeah. It's like I was kind of grateful that nobody could come to my yoga studio, that I could just see you on the computer.
Right.
Yeah,
so good stuff. Final thing I like to do, and this is something I started a few years ago, because we're now in the 21st century, and among other things, we can have conversations like this. I mean, you're in the Denver, Colorado area. I'm in the Hartford, Connecticut area, and we're having a conversation where we can see each other. And 30 years ago, that was impossible. Each other wasn't even on the agenda. And then the social media thing came along, and the phones, and all this technology has come along that has enabled us to publish books and self-publish and to post things on the various social media channels and share on podcasts and all these different ways that we're sharing information. And so it's become the new marketing model, right? Just put out as much information as you can and hope that you're going to reach the right people, and then they become your audience. They become your group, and it really does work. One thing though that we kind of overlook in all this, and this is the thing that I noticed, is we're putting out content to people who very often we never meet, we never see, and they're putting it to use in ways we don't know about, and they're getting results we don't know about either, and then we don't get credit for it. Well, wait a minute, that's not good. We got to give ourselves credit for that. So I like to take a moment to say, Brittany, on behalf of those people you've never met, never seen, never will meet, and never will see, who you've been helping in ways you didn't even know about, through your book, through the podcasts that you do, through the stuff that you post on social media and so forth. On their behalf, thank you for what you're doing, because you're making a difference in this world.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's really important. We skip over that, and it's too important. We can't keep skipping over that. So thank you for joining me today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So good to meet you.
Glad to meet you too. And yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I love what you're doing. And we'll even have to have a conversation at some point after my friend graduates from her yoga class. So we can compare notes, like, because her experience has been a little bit different from what you were describing. And that always makes an interesting conversation when you have differences like that. Anyway, thank you very much. Thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. And we will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.